Hi there, welcome to my third video in the series Product Analytics for Product Managers at B2B Startups. The problem that I'm trying to solve with this series is that I've seen many PMs who get stuck kind of staring at dashboards and reports without getting any actionable insights. And I think there are two main problems. Number one is they're staring at business metrics that aren't very actionable. So for example, they see, okay, revenue dipped, but so what? What do I do with that? Or in the best case, they are looking at the right product metrics. So they're looking at user activation, they're looking at user retention, but they don't really know how to interpret the data. They don't really know, is this good or is this bad? And what should I do next, right? So I decided to record this 4-part series where I outline 4 metrics or reports that I use in my day-to-day work and how I derive actionable insights from them. So basically letting you kind of have a peek over my shoulder. And this video will be about retention, user level retention. And I will echo everybody when I say that retention is super important. All right, so firstly, the question is, how do we define retention? What does healthy retention even look like for our product? So before you start analyzing your retention rates or start looking at fancy graphs, you need to understand what user behavior you're expecting for your different personas, for your different roles, or for your different ICPs. For example, do you expect users to trigger a certain event daily, weekly, monthly, right? It all depends on your product and on your target audience. If you don't know, you can compare yourself to direct competitors, or if you're in a new product category, you can look at alternatives that your users are using, maybe analog alternatives or alternatives from a completely different product category. You're trying to understand how often you're expecting them to come back. What is healthy behavior, right? And once you know that, you know, for example, on which intervals to measure. Now, here's an example of a pretty healthy retention curve for a B2B SaaS company. You might think, oh wow, there's a really steep drop off in the beginning. Yes, there is. This is quite normal. And in my first video, I talked, for example, about activation rates, where we saw that a median in activation rates is around 25%. Well, if you assume that 75% of new users never activate, of course, they also don't become recurring users, right? So understanding that makes it quite normal, understandable that we have such a drop-off in the beginning. And especially if you are operating in a red ocean, we have lots and lots of competition, so your customers have lots and lots of options. It's quite likely that there's a lot of users who are just trying your product out once, but for them it's not much better than the alternative they're used to and they're not coming back. This is not crazy. What we do want, however, is we want this retention curve to flatten, to become an almost straight line at the end, right? It can be a bit bouncy, but we want it to flatten out because that signifies that there is at least some subset of your new users who keep coming back, which means that they are getting continued value out of your product, which is a clear indicator for product market fit. Now you might wonder, where should it bottom out, right? Or where should it flatten out? Where should that line happen? There's lots and lots of industry benchmarks out there. When I look in my favorite product analytics tools for B2B SaaS, which is June.so, they tell me, for example, they say, hey, you should flatten out at around 20%. That's what we expect, which is nice, which is helpful. But in reality, what a healthy retention rate will be depends a lot on a variety of factors. Because if you think about how you calculate a retention rate, so it's basically you divide the number of active users at the end of a certain time period, which time period is up to you. You divide that by the number of users at the beginning of the time period, right? And that gives you the retention rate. So if you brought in like a bunch of new users because you did some crazy, amazing marketing campaign and you brought in like a bunch of people who actually weren't a great fit for your product, for example, because they were like early adopters who just wanted to play with it once and were never going to stay, this will make your retention rate look really bad, even though you didn't really change anything in your product. Your product's actually fine, nothing happened there. You just brought in a lot of users who were the wrong users, right? Why is the retention rate important? Well, it helps you understand whether you're operating a healthy business, right? Whether you're able to grow a sustainable business. So if you combine your customer acquisition costs with the point where your retention rate flattens, and your average revenue per customer or per user, you can calculate whether you're able to run a sustainable business. So I talked a bit about how you calculate this static number, this retention rate, but in reality I don't do that. I do this. I look at retention by acquisition date cohort. So for example, I look here at weekly cohorts. So I look at a group of users who signed up in this specific week, and I look at how well they retain week over week. Right here it's weekly intervals, can also be monthly, can be any other time frame, whatever is relevant for your product. So this is really helpful because I can check firstly whether my retention is increasing or decreasing over time, as the retention curve let me do as well. And it's basically a different representation of the retention curve here, but I can see these weekly cohorts. So this shows me also very clearly, again, where the biggest drop-off is happening. And there I can check, okay, is that drop-off expected? Is this all fine? Or is this much steeper than it should be? And also, do I see a change? Is there one cohort that is performing much better or much worse than another? And if so, why? And can I repeat that? If one cohort is performing much better than another and I can understand why, maybe I can make that something that's repeatable. Very important. Sometimes when you look at this stuff, it leaves you wondering why. Often it leaves you wondering why. And this is why I always supplement this kind of quantitative data with qualitative data. So user interviews, or shadowing users, or looking at session recordings. I'm trying to understand what users are really doing and understanding also the why behind it, their motivations. So always talk to your users. Now my favorite exercise with user retention data, which is using it to identify my power users and ideally my beachhead segment. Because the real reason, or the most important thing I do with retention data, is I look at who my best retaining users are and I try to build a better understanding of them. So can I identify a target audience segment that is more successful than my overall user base? And if so, why is that, right? Is there some connective tissue between these people? And once I understand that, I can ask myself, how can I get more of these particular users that are clearly more successful in my product? Or how can I drive other new users to become as successful as they are? So most product analytics tools will allow you to kind of build custom audience segments or contact lists for your best retained users. And that's really helpful. Firstly, I like to build contact lists, right? So that I can, for example, trigger one question surveys in the app only to these people because I want to get specific information from them, or I can reach out to them via email or in some other way to try to hop on the phone because I want to talk to them in the end of the day. And secondly, because I want to understand why they tried my product in the first place, why their alternative solution wasn't cutting it, and what's so great about my product. I want to know that. Secondly, once I build these custom audiences and I have a custom audience for my power users, I can run feature usage reports for these power users and hold that against my overall feature users reports. And I can see, for example, whether my power users or my best retaining users are doing a specific thing in the product that others aren't. Are they following a certain path, or are they uncovering a certain feature early on which others aren't uncovering, right? Because that gives me actionable insights and tells me that maybe I should drive other users to this specific feature, or that this is the right path, right? So maybe I can modify my onboarding to kind of follow that path, so I can turn more new users into these super engaged power users. So I think a deep understanding of who your power users are, this connective tissue, right, your ICP description, but also what drives them to your product and what keeps them coming back is everything. So firstly, it allows me to identify my so-called beachhead segment, which is the sub-segment of my target audience that is in the most excruciating pain without my solution, where I can establish market leadership, right? This segment where I can establish a foothold and expand from there. And secondly, once I understand who my power users are, I can lower my CAC payback period because I can target those very specific ideal customers more specifically. So I can no longer spray and pray, but I can go very specific with targeting. And I can also improve my website conversions because I can hone in on my messaging, right? We can all work together with marketing and use the right words that our customers use. And of course, if we target the right people and we manage to convert them, that has a positive impact on our CAC payback period. And third, last but not least, I can understand what problem our product solves for them specifically. Usually when I think about jobs to be done, users have kind of a job map. So there's a lot of steps in their job, and our solution usually addresses one of these steps. But by talking to our power users and understanding their entire job map, we can understand what else we can do for them, right? Like what kind of expansive value can we bring to the table? And this can, of course, inform our product roadmap. And it's the base for product and also customer expansion. I hope this was useful. So I think retention is an important health metric, like a KPI, to see if you're doing okay and you can build a sustainable business. But it also inspires very actionable ideas. And I think the most important thing is to understand who your power users are. Good luck.